What's your disposition then towards the Black Lives Matter movement? You mentioned it a couple times. They're obviously not comparable to Malcolm X. They're a very decentralized structure. There's no head of the BLM. What do you think about the movement, and would it be something that you support, obviously?
Well, there are three answers to that.
Yeah.
First, I understand the Black Lives Matter movement, given the fact that for hundreds of years, the humanity of African Americans has been up for grabs.
Mm-hmm.
Whether we're human beings or not, that's why when we enter hospitals, when we enter the so-called criminal justice system, when we deal in the economic system, we often aren't dealt with fairly because people don't see us as full human beings.
Right.
And so I understand Black Lives Matter in that particular context. When we start talking Black Lives Matter has nothing to do with all lives matter, I find that somewhat problematical. You know, I did a TED talk on this, Black Lives Matter because all lives matter, because I bring the two together, just like the Quran says, Ya ayyuhan nasu taqu rabbakum ladhi khalaqakum nafsin wahida. O humanity, reverence your guardian Lord who created you from one person, and from that and through to the end to create as me. Because so ultimately, we're all one human family. We should not let the racist paradigm that's been imposed on us by colonialists, by people who perpetuate Jim Crow laws, be the way we deal with the problem. And so, first of all, Black Lives Matter, I totally understand it because people act as if Black lives don't matter. But I don't understand it when we disconnect it from all lives matter, because the same energy that was being put against Black people in the 20s and 30s around lynching Black people was put against poor white people in the 20s and 30s in a movement called the eugenics movement. And this is a movement where over 60,000 Americans were sterilized under the color of law. And this movement started being aimed at, quote, lower class white people. Wow. And so if we understand this, we understand that the people who are being lynched and the people who are being sterilized have common cause. There's a small group of people at the top who will benefit from us fighting each other. That is, the people who are being lynched and the people who are being sterilized. We're fighting each other as if the issue is about skin color. The issue is about power. The issue is about oppression. The issue is about economic exploitation. And so once we begin to understand this, we say, yes, Black Lives Matter. It's also true that all lives matter. And so therefore, we're with anybody who's for standing up against economic oppression, against Black people and all people, against Native people. There are all kinds of people who've been oppressed. That doesn't mean that you dilute, because this is what people say, that you dilute the Black Lives Matter movement. In some sense, it makes it much more powerful. I offer to people the 1963 March on Washington, which was partially organized by the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, but he was made famous by that March on Washington. And there were hundreds of thousands of Black people and white people and labor people and indigenous people in that march. And still people saw it as a fight for Black people. People held the same ideas. Black and white people held the same ideas. We shall overcome, Black and white together. You can hold the same ideas. You can fight for Black people without pretending that somehow if you say that other lives matter, it dilutes you. This doesn't make any sense, and it cuts off natural allies in other communities. So I say Black Lives Matter, yes, absolutely, because we have to fight for our humanity in this country. But I also say that all lives matter, because it's not just Black people who are being killed by the healthcare system today. The healthcare system today is A, not a system at all. B, is a system. I'm 75 years old, and I'm dealing with Medicare and Medicaid. It is an insane, paper-based, capitalistic system. It is insane. It is a shameless system in a country that calls itself, and I'll tell anybody, it's a shameless system in a country that calls itself a beacon of light in the world, that people over 65 or 70 years old every year are bombarded with these ridiculous ads about their health care. Something so important, particularly when your body is breaking down, right? And so this is insane. So the reality is that older people, just because they're older, are dying because they can't navigate a crazy system. And that, people of color die more often, absolutely. But that doesn't mean that the white people who are dying who are poor, or the Latino people who die who are poor, their lives don't matter. We should just talk about Black Lives Matter. And so we should understand that we're in a struggle for justice, as the Nation of Islam used to say, freedom, justice, and equality for everybody. Because that was what our beloved alayhi salatu wasalam was about from the beginning, and that's what we should be about. And it does not keep us from standing up for justice for black people, but it helps us by connecting our struggle with the struggle of other people. It makes us stronger, not weaker.
For sure. And you obviously, you don't talk about this situation as an outsider. You've lost your own son to police violence, you mentioned in class one time.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Malik was named after El-Hajj Malik Shabazz. We had high hopes for him, hoping that he would follow in the footsteps of El-Hajj Malik Shabazz, that is, to be a warrior for justice for all people. That's, before he died, he famously said in his autobiography, "I am for truth no matter who speaks it. I am for justice no matter who's for or against. I'm a human being first and foremost, and as such I'm for whomever or whatever benefits humanity as a whole." That's the kind of person that I wanted Malik to grow up to be, that would stand up for justice for everybody while standing up for justice for his people. Because Malcolm X never stopped advocating for black people in particular, but then he shifted to humanity in general. And we can walk and chew gum at the same time. We can spearhead actions to deal with racism while dealing with the oppression of other people. We act as if we can, but we can. We can't pretend that looking at black Sahabas of 1,400 years ago is the same as looking at black people who live in inner cities today. That's just simply not the same. And I don't think it helps us to sort of silo ourselves in that particular way. So Malik, in April of 1997, was driving in East Haven, a place that's never been seen as friendly to black people. There's a lot of disagreement of how he was targeted, but what's not in dispute is that the police stopped him in East Haven, and he pulled off, and a chase ensued from somewhat suburban East Haven into inner city New Haven, where I still live, by the way, in a different part of inner city New Haven, and for a traffic violation, basically, because that's what the police were chasing him for. And a confrontation ensued in a field near the home where he then lived with his mother. His mother and I were divorced at the time. And
how old was he at the time?
He was 21.
Okay.
And the police officer approached the car. He said he feared for his life, but that's all police officers have to say in order to get off. And he said that Malik started moving the car, and he threatened him. He took the butt of his gun, there's no dispute about this, banged the side window of the car, the driver's side that Malik was driving, and shot him 7 or 8 times.
Wow. At
point blank range. And that's what happened. No matter what the police officer was thinking at the time, I know that race had something to do with it. I believe that if Malik had not been black, that the officer would have been less likely to kill him. There's plenty of data on this. That's the society we live in. But while I was crying and grieving over this, I'm also a prison chaplain. I've been going into the New Haven County Jail, we call it, the correctional institution, for 4 decades. And the hadith that came to mind was something that I've been teaching to the young men at the time, is that patience is at the beginning of calamity. And for my baby to die at the hands of somebody whose salary I paid, I'm a taxpayer, whose bullets I paid for, was very painful. Under those circumstances, having grown up in the Jim Crow South, understanding the racial dynamics as I understood it, was a very painful thing. And I was extremely angry. But I tried to be patient, and it was extremely hard. Excuse me. But the thing I didn't want to do was to silo the black community off and say this is only something that happens in the black community.
Yeah.
The fact that our communities are flooded with guns as we speak is a danger to everybody. It's more of a danger to black people for various reasons, but it was a danger to those 6-year-old kids up at Sandy Hook.
Right. So, what was the sorry, I can't start a word with W. What was the aftermath of the whole situation? Like, I'm sure the whole community reacted to that. They didn't just let it slide. I'm sure people came up and they were upset about it and they protested. Is that what happened?
Several things happened. One, first, that my friends that I knew from prison called me and said, "You just say the word, we're gonna ride in East Haven." I said, "Y'all need to calm down," right? You know, and I thought about retaliation, physical retaliation. Number two, my ex-wife, she led a series of demonstrations that have lasted up until now around the killing of my son. Number three, she filed a lawsuit that went up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court denied it. Basically, when an officer says, you know, I feared for my life, under circumstances, and plus we didn't have a videos like we have videos today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It was a hard case for me. What I did personally, first of all, is that I imposed a 60-day moratorium on me speaking to the press because I was bitterly angry.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think you do yourself any good by speaking to the press when you're bitterly angry, because that's not what you're all about. That was not what I was all about. That's not what I was teaching my children, and that's not what I taught Malik, to be bitterly angry at somebody because they were white
Mm-hmm.
or black or Latino. That's not what I taught. But the race angst was up in me, and I knew that I couldn't trust myself to say anything that would be helpful, and I didn't want to divide the community. Secondly, I called the mayor of East Haven and the head of the police commission of East Haven, and I said to both of them, I said, "Do you have any young men they both happen to be Italian American. Do you have any young men in your family that are 21-year-olds, as Malik was?" And they said yes. And I said, listen to me, and listen to me carefully. If you cover this up, which cities and police departments are prone to do,
Right.
the streets will be less safe for your 21-year-olds, because what the message you'll be sending to that officer and other police officers is that it's okay to run up to a car, bang the window, with the butt of your gun. This is something you see in the movies, in westerns, in the movies. This is right. You don't think he didn't learn this in police academy. You bang the window with the butt of your gun and shoot somebody at point blank range during a traffic stop. I said, if you cover this up, if you fight this is what's going to happen. Within a year or so, a white woman in nearby North Branford, not so far from East Haven, was killed under similar circumstances.
Wow.
She was driving away from the police officer, and he shot her through the driver's side window and killed her.
Wow.
Nobody made a fuss about it.
Even the white woman?
Nobody made. You need to hear this. There weren't demonstrations that I know about it. Right. Definitely not the kind of demonstrations against what happened to Malik. Right.
Yeah.
Right. But the city of North Branford settled with her, and the city of East Haven didn't settle with us.
Mm.
So you see what's happening here. So, but my point is that you can't silo these things. I mean, as I was saying, that the fact that we have so many guns on the street makes the community. I live in the community that's a different inner city community that Malik grew up in on the other side of town, near the Yale New Haven Hospital, One of the reasons we are over-policed, and we are, is because there's so many guns in the street. I listen to police officers, and I have friends and family members who are in law enforcement. They talk about the fact that what's changed on the streets is that a 14-year-old is more likely to have a gun than he was 30 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a police officer, it changes your whole mindset. Am I saying that it's okay for officers to shoot 14-year-olds? No. Am I saying that racism is not a reality in many of these police departments, both individually and in the ethos and in the culture of this? No. But what I am saying is that one factor in this is that we as a country have decided that, we like guns in the hands of almost everybody,
Mm-hmm.
particularly in the state of Texas, right? Almost everybody. And this is dangerous for everybody, but particularly dangerous for black and people of color. And so this is, so the aftermath of this is that I feel more of a firmer resolve to work with young people who are incarcerated, like Malik was from time to time, to speak out against the kind of attitude that we have toward people having guns, and to try not to silo this issue of Black Lives Matter, because one of the reasons Black Lives Matter is because all lives matter.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the reasons that it's easy to focus on black people and to focus on this way is to divide and conquer us. And now there's Black Lives Matter versus Blue Lives Matter versus All Lives Matter. The reality is that people should rise up together and say enough is enough. Killing babies and 14-year-olds shooting each other in the street is not a good thing, and we can do something about it by passing more common sense gun control laws.
So it sounds like then obviously you're not a big fan of the approach that says, you know what, and this is actually something that people are using, even academics are supporting, to say that riots do bring about change, and sometimes even violent riots. It's because it's the voice of the masses. It's the way that they articulate their concerns.
I live in New Haven, Connecticut. I was born in Baltimore, Maryland.
Mm-hmm.
Both of these communities have been touched by riots. Do I think those communities are better off after the riots? I said, heck no.
Mm-hmm.
That these were destructive activities that, for the most part, hurt the people who lived in those communities and hurt the reputation of black people as a whole. Because people say, see there?
Right.
That's
exactly.
how they act.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you think about this, the rhetoric around defund the police? Do you think that's a good move then?
I think that what we call policing in this country is wrong-headed.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think it's a mistake to send a police to a mental health, something that's clearly a mental health issue.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, common sense people would say this. I think defund the police is an unfortunate term, like some unfortunate terms that tends to divide people into two camps. Either you want to fund the police or defund the police. No, I want people not to die at the hands of police. I want crime reduced in my community. I don't care what you call it, public safety, public support. I mean, I don't care what you call it. I want the money to be spent on reducing the crime and making us safer. The current situation in many of the cities in the United States is that crime is going up and we're less safe.
So reform rather than defund.
Well, yeah, change, reform, sure.
I hear you. So the path forward then, what do you think should happen here? Should the Black Lives Matter movement be, because obviously you're saying things shouldn't be siloed, then does that mean we want, like the way Eric Love describes in his book on Islamophobia, that there should be more cross-functional effort between different racial and ethnic groups?
Yeah, well, these are tools. I think the first question is, what's your GPS?
Mm-hmm.
When I was a kid, you need to know how to read a map to get from point A to point B. If you want to get from one city to another, you better know how to read a map or you end up lost. Now all you do is pull out your phone and talk to it,
mm-hmm.
right? And so, because you have a GPS with you. Here's what's my point here, is that for the Muslim, and so particularly African American Muslim, but all Muslims, our GPS should be the Quran and the Sunnah of Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam. I mean, this is too obvious, but it's not obvious in the sense of way we frame these issues. We often frame these issues in the rhetoric of the streets, not the rhetoric of the Quran and the prophetic paradigm. See, because if we frame it in the rhetoric of the streets, we're going to be divide and conquer. We're going to say Black Lives Matter, Blue Lives Matter. If we frame it in the rhetoric of Surah and Nisa 1, right? Yeah, and you Nasa talk of Rabbakum, you have a totally different approach. Yes, you're angry about the racism against black people. Yes, you're angry about the poverty. But you just don't lose your mind and get caught up in the rhetoric that's been developed by the people who sought to oppress us in the first place.
I hear you. Okay, Jazakallah khair then. I know you have very limited time today, so maybe this will be a good first podcast, and we'll come back up, inshallah, to New Haven and pick up where we left off, inshallah.
You're welcome.
So Jazakallah khair for your time, Dr. Jones. I appreciate you coming.
Alhamdulillah.
Jazakallah khair. We'll see you again soon, inshallah.
Inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.